The crisp, post-ski trip air still lingered in our living room as Jeff, draped across the couch with an air of post-adventure melancholy, flipped aimlessly through channels. Our skiing escapade had been a series of hilariously harrowing near misses, mostly thanks to Jeff's unique approach to navigating the snowy roads. It was these memories, still fresh and funny, that sparked an idea as Jeff paused on a particularly enthusiastic car commercial. "Arthur," Jeff began, his voice echoing with a newfound revelation. "These steel chariots of yours, they require a sort of permission to command?" I looked up from my book, meeting his gaze with a mix of amusement and anticipation for where this conversation was heading. "You mean a driver's license?" "Yeah, Jeff. You can't just conjure up a car and expect to drive legally without one." The concept seemed to both intrigue and befuddle him. "But why?" "In the underworld, if you can seize it, you can steer it," Jeff mused, clearly puzzled by the bureaucracy of mortal transportation. Remembering our chaotic journey to the ski resort, a spectacle of unintentional off-roading, spontaneous vehicle levitation, and a particularly bewildered highway patrol officer, I seized the moment to suggest, "Maybe it's time you learn to drive the human way, Jeff. Legally. With a license." The flashback seemed to hit Jeff with a mix of nostalgia and realization. His attempts at driving had been unconventional, to say the least. Levitating the car to bypass a traffic jam had certainly saved us time, but the look of utter confusion from the officer we floated past was a clear indicator that we were bending the rules a bit too far. Intrigued by the challenge and ever eager for a new adventure, Jeff sat up, his eyes alight with determination. "Very well, Arthur. I shall acquire this license. How hard can it be for a demon of my caliber?" The next morning found us on the steps of the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, a place as mundane and bureaucratic as they come. To Jeff, however, it was another strange and mystifying realm to conquer. As we entered, Jeff's presence immediately stirred the air, papers fluttering as if caught in a gentle breeze. He looked around, his curiosity piqued by the rows of chairs filled with waiting patrons, the ticket machines spitting out numbers, and the utterly disinterested expressions of the DMV staff. "Charm and minor spells should expedite this process, don't you think, Arthur?" Jeff whispered, a mischievous glint in his eye as he eyed the crowded room. Before I could protest, Jeff discreetly waved his hand, a subtle spell aimed at reducing our wait time. Instead, the enchanted air turned the room into a mini whirlwind of flying paperwork and glitching computer screens. Patrons clutched their forms as employees looked around, bewildered by the sudden chaos. "Jeff," I hissed, trying to contain the magical mess. "Maybe just stick to the human way here, okay?" Jeff, realizing his mistake, offered an apologetic smile that did little to calm the suddenly frantic DMV staff. As we took our number and found seats, I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. A demon who could command fire and summon storms was about to face his most unpredictable challenge yet: bureaucracy, human style. And so, our DMV Odyssey began, not with a bang or a burst of flames, but with a small, chaotic whirlwind in a government building. A fitting start to what promised to be one of our most amusing adventures yet. Our adventure into the heart of bureaucratic mundanity continued as Jeff and I took our seats in the overcrowded waiting area of the DMV. Our number, C-158, displayed mockingly on the small slip of paper Jeff clutched between his fingers. The room was a sea of impatient sighs and the occasional cough, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. Jeff, ever the embodiment of otherworldly curiosity, was fascinated by the dreary decor and the diversity of humanity gathered for the singular purpose of navigating the DMV's labyrinthine processes. "Arthur," Jeff whispered, leaning close as if to share a profound secret. "This place, it's like a temple to tedium. Do they not know I could solve all their issues with a snap of my fingers?" I shushed him gently, mindful of the curious glances we were already attracting. "It's about following the rules, Jeff. Remember, we're doing this the human way. No magic, no shortcuts." Jeff huffed, a look of bemused resignation on his face, as he settled back into his chair, observing the room with keen interest. His gaze lingered on the ticket machine, a simple device that seemed to wield an inordinate amount of power over the room's occupants. Our wait was long and uneventful until Jeff's patience, or lack thereof, began to show. To amuse himself, he started making small talk with the people around us, his questions ranging from their reasons for visiting the DMV to their thoughts on the metaphysical properties of queue numbers. His ability to shift from discussing the mundanity of license renewals to the existential implications of waiting in line was nothing short of miraculous, leaving our fellow waiters bewildered, amused, and in some cases, oddly enlightened. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only an hour, our number was called. Jeff sprang to his feet with an enthusiasm most people reserve for winning lottery tickets, not a summons to the service counter. "Come, Arthur, our quest progresses," he exclaimed, striding confidently toward counter number 12, where a weary-looking DMV employee awaited us. "Name?" the employee asked, without looking up. "Jeff," he replied, and then, after a pause, added, "Just Jeff." The employee, now looking at Jeff with a raised eyebrow, began the process of entering his information. Jeff, meanwhile, was visibly struggling to stay still, his gaze darting around the office, taking in the rows of cubicles, the stacks of forms, and the intricately detailed safety posters adorning the walls. As the employee explained the steps for applying for a driver's license, fingerprinting, the written test, the road test, Jeff listened with a mix of fascination and impatience. When informed of the need for a vision test, Jeff assured the bemused employee that his demonic heritage provided him with exemplary ocular capabilities, much to the confusion and mild amusement of those nearby. The fingerprinting process was its own comedy, as Jeff's attempts to press his non-human digits onto the pad resulted in a series of smudges that bore little resemblance to any prints the machine was accustomed to processing. With a mix of frustration and determination, the DMV employee finally managed to capture something passable, sending us on our way to the next step of the process. "Arthur, this human ritual is fraught with complexity and, dare I say, inefficiency," Jeff mused as we moved to the next station. "But fear not, for I shall master it as I have mastered all things." I couldn't help but smile at his unwavering confidence, even as I braced myself for the next phase of our DMV adventure. If the simple act of registering for a license was this eventful, I could only imagine what the written test would bring. As we sat down at the designated testing computers, Jeff cracking his knuckles in preparation, I realized that no matter the outcome, this journey through the DMV was proving to be one of our most memorable escapades yet, filled with laughter, learning, and a healthy dose of the unexpected. And with Jeff by my side, I wouldn't have it any other way. After navigating the bureaucratic maze that was the DMV's registration process, Jeff and I found ourselves seated in front of aging computer terminals, ready to tackle the written driving test. Jeff, who had spent the better part of the morning casting skeptical glances at the DMV's antiquated technology, now faced his own challenge. A test designed for humans, by humans. "I shall conquer this test as Alexander the Great conquered Persia," Jeff declared, his fingers poised dramatically over the keyboard. "Let's just aim for a passing score, Alexander," I muttered, my focus on my own screen. The test began, and Jeff's confidence seemed to falter as he encountered question after question about road signs, right-of-way protocols, and speed limits, concepts he found amusingly arbitrary. "Why must one yield?" he mused aloud. "In the underworld, might makes right. This yielding is surely a sign of weakness." Trying to stifle my laughter, I glanced over to see Jeff's screen displaying a question about pedestrian crosswalks. His brow furrowed in concentration. He clicked his answer with a flourish. "Pedestrians should be granted passage based on their speed and cunning. Survival of the fittest," he explained to the screen, clearly satisfied with his logic. He clicked his answer with a flourish, only to be met with the gentle, incorrect feedback from the system. The most memorable moment, however, came when Jeff encountered a question about what to do if one's car started to skid on ice. With the seriousness of a general strategizing in battle, he reasoned, one must simply command the elements to cease their betrayal. Ice, be still. His dramatic whisper might have been effective in the depths of a magical forest. But in the DMV, it only earned a puzzled look from a nearby proctor. As we neared the end of the test, Jeff's frustration was palpable. The final question, regarding the use of headlights in fog, had him stumped. Fog, like any foe, should be illuminated with the fires of tenacity, not low beams, he grumbled, choosing his answer based on a metaphor rather than the driving manual. When the scores were tallied, my relief at passing was matched only by Jeff's astonishment at his failure. Staring at the screen, he exclaimed, "Betrayed by bureaucracy. These rules are as convoluted as the mazes of Minos." As we exited the testing area, Jeff was already plotting his return, vowing to master these pedestrian puzzles with the same fervor he applied to his magical studies. "Worry not, Arthur. I shall return armed with knowledge and a newfound respect for your world's obsession with signage. The DMV has not seen the last of Jeff." The ride home was filled with Jeff's plans for conquering the written test, from flashcards to mock exams. His determination, while amusing, was also infectious. I couldn't help but admire his resolve to adapt, even in the face of mundane mortal challenges like the DMV. As we drove, I realized that Jeff's journey through the world of human legality was more than just a quest for a driver's license. It was a hilarious exploration of our differences and similarities, and I couldn't wait to see what lessons and laughter the next attempt would bring. Following Jeff's valiant but vain first attempt at the written test, a week of intense study, interspersed with bouts of frustration and incredulity at human traffic laws, culminated in a triumphant passing score on his second try. With the written hurdle overcome, only the road test stood between Jeff and his coveted driver's license. Jeff approached the road test with the sort of confidence typically reserved for legendary heroes facing down dragons, not mundane mortal tasks like driving. However, as we soon discovered, the DMV's driving examiner, a no-nonsense gentleman named Mr. Carl with years of experience and an impressively unflappable demeanor, was about to become Jeff's most formidable dragon yet. "I have mastered the arcane arts, Arthur. How much more challenging can earthly transportation be?" Jeff mused as he approached our designated test vehicle, a modest sedan that looked woefully ordinary for someone of Jeff's unique talents. The first few minutes of the test went surprisingly smoothly, with Jeff managing to follow basic commands and obey traffic signs with a reasonable amount of skill. That was until we reached the parallel parking segment of the test. Jeff, feeling the mundane method lacked a certain panache, decided to employ a touch of telekinesis to guide the car into the spot. The car moved sideways, inching closer to the curb, not with the gentle ease of a practiced driver, but with the abruptness of a magician performing a trick. Mr. Carl, who had been scribbling notes in his clipboard, looked up just in time to see the car settle perfectly into the space. His pen paused midair, and for a moment there was silence, save for the distant hum of traffic. "Mr. Jeff," he started, his voice a mix of bewilderment and caution. "While impressive, I must insist that you perform the parking maneuver using the vehicle's conventional controls." Flushed with success but chagrined at the reprimand, Jeff nodded, offering a sheepish grin. "Of course, Mr. Carl, I merely wish to demonstrate efficiency." The road test continued, with Jeff's confidence only slightly dented. However, his desire to showcase his prowess soon led us down a more literal path of bewilderment. Approaching a particularly congested section of the route, Jeff mumbled something about unnecessary delays and waved his hand discreetly. Suddenly, the world outside blurred as we took a shortcut, a dimensional hop that skipped us forward a few hundred meters, bypassing the traffic jam entirely. The move was so smooth, so disorientingly swift, that it took a moment for Mr. Carl and me to fully register what had happened. "Mr. Jeff, under no circumstances are dimensional shortcuts part of the driving curriculum," Mr. Carl said, his voice steady but his eyes wide with a mix of shock and an undeniable glint of curiosity. "Please adhere to the road as it exists in this dimension." As the test drew to a close, with no more unsanctioned magic but plenty of heart-stopping moments, like Jeff's enthusiastic but overly sharp turns and his liberal interpretation of speed limits. Mr. Carl seemed to age years in the span of an hour. When we finally returned to the DMV, the car intact and all laws of physics seemingly observed, for the most part. Mr. Carl let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding the entire time. Jeff, ever the optimist, beamed at Mr. Carl, eagerly awaiting his verdict. Mr. Carl, with a resigned sigh and a glance at his notes that now included terms like telekinesis and dimensional shortcuts, finally spoke. Mr. Jeff, while your techniques are unconventional and not within the scope of this examination, your control of the vehicle, by conventional means, was adequate. Congratulations, you've passed. Jeff's joy was uncontainable, a victory cry echoing in the parking lot as he accepted his temporary license. Mr. Carl, for his part, offered a weary smile, likely pondering the quiet retirement he so richly deserved after today. With Jeff's newly minted driver's license in hand, or rather, triumphantly waved in the air like a flag of conquest, we stood outside the DMV, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the parking lot. Jeff, practically vibrating with excitement, declared, "Now, Arthur, we shall embark upon a celebratory voyage. I have just the locale in mind, a place of wonder and delight." I eyed him warily, my imagination conjuring images of otherworldly landscapes far beyond the DMV's jurisdiction. "Maybe we should just start with a simple drive around town," I suggested, hoping to steer us towards a more terrestrial celebration. "Nonsense, Arthur. We have the means to traverse the stars. Why limit ourselves to mere asphalt?" Jeff countered, his enthusiasm undimmed. Before I could formulate a response, Jeff ushered me into the passenger seat of our modest, decidedly non-demonic vehicle. With a flourish, he started the engine, the car's hum mundane yet somehow ominous under his command. As the initial phase of our journey unfolded with an unexpected adherence to mundane reality, Jeff, behind the wheel of our decidedly non-magical sedan, showcased a surprising dedication to the rules of the road. His concentration was palpable, his usually restless energy channeled into the meticulous observation of speed limits and traffic signs. However, the normalcy of this drive was destined to be short-lived, a mere preamble to the adventure Jeff had envisioned. With a flair for the dramatic that was quintessentially Jeff, he broke the monotony of our standard terrestrial journey with a proposition wrapped in excitement. "Behold, Arthur. This mundane mode of transport does not befit the celebration of our interdimensional camaraderie. Why confine ourselves to the ground when the fabric of the cosmos beckons?" His voice was tinged with the thrill of the unknown, his hand poised over the dashboard as if it were a control panel to another realm. Without waiting for my consent, which, in all honesty, he rarely did, Jeff initiated our first foray into the extraordinary. A subtle, yet potent, gesture of his hand sent a shiver through the vehicle, a visual spectacle of colors enveloping us as reality itself seemed to warp and weave. For a moment, we were not merely driving. We were gliding through the very essence of space and time, the scenery outside transforming into a surreal landscape that defied all laws of physics and geography. The experience, though brief, was exhilarating and disorienting in equal measure. "Perhaps, Jeff, we might reserve such scenic detours for less public excursions," I suggested, half in jest, fully aware that my plea for normalcy was a flickering candle in the hurricane that was Jeff's enthusiasm for the extraordinary. Jeff's laughter, rich and unburdened, filled the car as he gracefully acquiesced to my request, though not without a playful retort about the expansiveness of the universe waiting to be explored. However, Jeff's appetite for adventure wasn't easily satiated. Inspired by our detour through the cosmos, he sought to establish a more direct form of communication with potential celestial observers. The car's turn signals, typically mundane tools of terrestrial travel, became Jeff's medium for reaching out to the stars. With deliberate pauses and flashes, he sent a Morse code message skyward, a beacon for any interstellar travelers curious about our terrestrial exploits. Consider it an invitation to the universe, Jeff explained, his gaze fixed on the heavens, searching for a sign of acknowledgement from the vast unknown. Perhaps the aliens have their own DMV to contend with, I mused, the skepticism in my voice belied by a secret hope that the night sky might wink back at us with the light of distant spacecraft. Despite the lack of immediate alien RSVPs, our spirits remained undimmed as Jeff guided us toward the culmination of our journey, an ice cream shop renowned not just for its earthly confections, but for flavors that hinted at the cosmic. Sitting at a small outdoor table, our ice cream melting under the afternoon sun, we reflected on the day's adventure. Jeff, ever the philosophical demon, mused, "Arthur, it occurs to me that friendship, much like driving, requires patience, understanding, and the occasional willingness to navigate uncharted territories." I smiled, raising my spoon in a toast, and maybe a reminder that sometimes the simplest paths can lead to the greatest adventures. As we enjoyed our ice cream, laughing over the day's events and planning our next escapade, with a promise of fewer interdimensional shortcuts, I realized that life with Jeff was an unpredictable journey, one I wouldn't trade for all the normalcy in the world. Whether behind the wheel or delving into the unknown, our friendship was a constant, a reminder that chaos could indeed be a license for adventure.